Hello, welcome to A Moment in Time with Nex. If you don't know me, I go live every single day. I have been live every single day for over 5.5 years straight, at least as of today, as we do this live stream book review of this book, The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande, I believe is how you pronounce it. Grab a screenshot if you like. And this book was a book that was recommended in Charlie Munger's book, Poor Charlie's Almanac, which is a big, thick book, pretty heavy read, but he talks about the importance of checklists in that book. And I would say that this book was a very light read. So even though it's about 200 pages long, it's very anecdotal. It's a lot of kind of stories about the point, and even without reading it, you can pretty much guess what the point of the book is, which is the importance of checklists and how checklists can dramatically improve the results of really any process. So a lot of the book was spent talking about airlines and physicians, particularly surgery, because I believe this guy is a surgeon. So it's a lot about the importance of checklists in medical practice and the importance of checklists for airline pilots. So in case things go wrong, because people's lives are in their hands in terms of an airplane crash or a surgery that gets, botched. So as I was reading it, it was a little bit tricky for me to feel like it was relevant to the kind of work that I do, but I did get some good takeaways. So if you don't know what I do, is I'm a content creator. Like I said, I go live every single day. I go live on a lot of different places with a lot of different kinds of content, and you can check out all my other pages and links and everything on my website, which is just my username, NexJuice.com. Am I pointing the right way? Yeah, my little watermark there. NexJuice.com. That's also where you can support this channel if you like content like this, and there are a lot of different ways to support. So anyway, back to the book. There are two main things. This is going to be a pretty short book review. I guess I would give this book like 2 or 3 stars. I mean, maybe even 2. It was okay. It wasn't deeply profound, and it was heavily anecdotal, which are really not usually books that I love. Interesting stories, sure, but I usually skip over a lot of that stuff, which is why it's such a light read, because if you skip all the stories, you get the gist and the idea of what he's getting at here pretty quickly. So he talks about the importance of checklists, and this can be implemented into any business. So if you've read one of my favorite books called Built to Sell by John Warrillow, and also The E-Myth by... Who wrote The E-Myth? Sorry, guys. Let me look that up real quick. Gerber? Michael Gerber? E-Myth. Yeah, Michael Gerber. Great books about businesses and the importance of making your business more automated, making your trainings more efficient and streamlined. So as you start to hire people in your company, you can just kind of hand them a pre-designed process and system rather than having to train people one-on-one. If you've ever worked for a small company, you probably know what we're getting at there. So this is the kind of thing that you can implement into your business to systemize the processes that you do, especially those of you who are solopreneurs, entrepreneurs out there doing everything yourself and not really having a documented process and system and way of doing things. So you can use a checklist to start to implement some type of system, and part of your system and process is going to be to use the checklist to make sure you don't miss anything or overlook anything. And you're going to want to have the most important things on that checklist. You don't want every single little bit on the checklist, and he spends a lot of time talking about how you rule out things from the checklist and how you decide what to include in there. But there's 2 things that I want to kind of pretty much read out of here to give you the gist of the book without you having to read it yourself. So towards the end of the book, he talks about, this is how he puts it: all learned occupations have a definition of professionalism, a code of conduct. And he says that it's pretty universal in most professions. These 3, and then they add a 4th, particularly for airlines, but he wants to adapt it for checklists as well. And first is an expectation of selflessness. So I recently read another book, which I will do a review on here very soon. Hello, Kenyatta, how are you? Is that KJ? And he talks about the concept of being otherish. So you want to have your own self-interest in mind, The Virtue of Selfishness, if you don't know, one of my favorite books by Ayn Rand, and have other interest as well. You don't want to be completely self-sacrificial and only worry about what other people want, because then you're not pursuing any of your own goals and interests and desires. So other-ish is this combination between being other, interested, and selfish. So having this balance between the two is my preferred way of operating, and I would suggest that you keep that in mind as well. So he's just basically using that to describe responsibility. You know, you're responsible for these other people, for your customers, for their experience with your company or service. So it's important to keep them in mind and what is going to best serve them. Hi, KJ. Number 2 is an expectation of skill, that we will aim for excellence in our knowledge and expertise. Speaks for itself. 3rd is an expectation of trustworthiness, that we will be responsible in our personal behavior toward our charges. You can call them charges if you want, the people that you work with. And then aviators add in the 4th, which is discipline. And he talks about the importance of being disciplined and using your checklist and making sure that you get the maximum benefit out of it. And he uses lots of data and studies that show that a lot of these checklists decrease infection rates in hospitals, they decrease fatalities, they decrease mistakes, and they're generally just worth taking the second to check the list off. And a big component of checklists is to make sure that it's clear who should be communicated what at what time in the process, and that how checklists really are a big means of facilitating communication among a team or a group that are responsible for a customer or for a client or a patient, however you refer to your charges. Hi Glenn, how are you? Good to see you. Hi everybody. Okay, so then the last one I wanted to share with you is this that I found in the appendix, which I really like, and it's a checklist for checklists. And this is how you develop your checklist. Okay. Do you have clear, concise objectives for your checklist? What are you trying to accomplish with your checklist here? What is the anticipated goal outcome of this? And that's how you can make sure that it's not becoming too long in a lot of cases, right? If a checklist is like 10 pages long, it can really slow down the process and effectiveness of what you're trying to improve on. Is each item, 1, a critical safety step and in great danger of being missed? So for many of us, safety is going to be arguable, but let's just say, is it a critical step in the process? The next one, is each item not adequately checked by other mechanisms? So is this already covered somewhere else in another system or process or training or checklist, so you don't need to include it here on this one? Is each item actionable with a specific response required for each item? Is each item designed to be read aloud as a verbal check? This is going to be different depending on your industry that you're in, but they, again, getting back into the importance of communication and communicating that the checklist has been checked. So with the airlines, you have the co-pilot that kind of reads it off to the captain, and the captain goes through and accomplishes the checklist. It's a way of kind of dividing and conquering the checklist. One person's kind of reading through it and the other person's taking the actions. And then, is each item one that can be affected by the use of a checklist? Pretty obvious. Have you considered adding items that will improve communication among team members? And have you considered involving all members of the team in the checklist creation process? So there might be things that someone on the team is doing that no one even really knows is part of the process. So you want to kind of have their eyes on it, get their input, because they're the ones going to be using the checklist. And the more involved with the development of it they are, the more likely they are to take ownership of it and therefore use it and make sure it's getting used by others. Hi, Jose. I am going to be an aspiring author. The book isn't done yet, but once I have the book written, then I think I'm considered an aspiring author. Yes, Glenn. Yeah, I'm glad that you're here. Yeah, I don't stream on YouTube a lot. I mainly just do book reviews on here and the occasional ASMR video. Hi, Willie. How are you? Mostly right now I'm streaming on Twitch and Instagram while I build my TikTok following back up. We need to get TikTok back to 1,000 followers in order to start going live over there again, which is my favorite place to go live as of right now. Okay, so the next part is the drafting of the checklist. Does the checklist utilize natural breaks in workflow, aka pause points? So for me as a live streamer, before going live is a good time to implement a checklist. Right before I'm clicking start streaming, go through the checklist, make sure I did each thing that I need to do preparing for going live. Does the checklist use simple language structure and basic language? Anyone should be able to use it, and it shouldn't be overly complicated or overly wordy. It should be as simple and straightforward and basic as it can be, while still, covering those things we talked about, making sure the critical steps are included. Does the checklist have a title that reflects its objectives? That can be helpful to making sure that you're remembering the importance of the checklist, because if someone's using this every single day, the tendency is going to be to say, I know the checklist already. It's mental. I just do it and I don't use the checklist anymore. That discipline component is like, you use the checklist every time. Don't just expect to remember it, because you're likely to overlook and forget a step here and there if you take for granted that you already know what you're supposed to do. So the whole point of the checklist really is so that you don't rely on just memory, especially in stressful environments. The next one, and this is important too for people, if you ever intend to delegate any of the responsibilities of your business, if you are doing the solopreneur thing, a lot of small business owners, they kind of do so much and they just say, well, I just do it. I just know how to do it in my head. Well, if you document that system and that process, it's going to be a lot easier to train someone else how to do that someday. Does the checklist fit on one page? Like I said, you don't want to have a really long one. Does it have a simple, uncluttered, and logical format? Right? We want it to go in order of what makes sense. You don't want to be like, step one is like the last thing that you check, and then the bottom is the first thing you check. You want to make sure it has like a logical flow to it. So it's stuff that you're checking off as you're doing it in order. Minimizing the use of color, make sure that it's easy to read, clear, simple. It doesn't need to have a bunch of designs and distractions on there. They talk about the font, making sure that it's dark font on a light background, again, just increasing legibility. Are there fewer than 10 items per pause point? So, if you're using multiple checklists as you go through your process, it should be pretty quick. You should have less than 10 items on each list. Stephen, I think you're confusing me with someone else. I was never pursuing a nursing degree. Is the date of creation or revision clearly marked? That's really important, because then you can look at it and see, okay, how long has it been since we updated this checklist, and kind of looked at it and made sure that it's still fresh and applicable and not outdated. And then finally, validation of the checklist. Have you trialed the checklist? Have you modified it as a result of your trials? Don't just make one and then be like, yeah, that's it, we're good now. That's why we have the creation date or the revision date, so that we're constantly, maybe you're setting once a year, you go through and review your processes and systems and make sure logins to websites are still accurate, making sure that, because you could have a whole system or process, and then some software that you use to execute that system changes. So then you have to change your checklist in response to that. Oh, I don't remember that, Stephen. Does the checklist fit the flow of work? We talked about that. Does the checklist detect errors at a time when they can still be corrected? Right? You want the preventative checklist. You know how they say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure? You don't put the checklist off like, oh, my boss needs me to do the checklist, so after I'm done, I'm going to go through and check all the boxes. The whole point is to try to prevent missing things. It seems like that goes without saying, but it probably does happen a lot. Can the checklist be completed in a reasonably brief period of time? And have you made plans for future review and revision of the checklist? So for me, I feel like yearly is adequate for what I do, and you might be in that same boat. It might need to be more frequent for you, maybe twice a year or even seasonally, but probably not more frequently than that. And that concludes this live stream of The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande, a book review of, it's all about how to get things right. You know, so we're trying to, it's kind of like Six Sigma here, you know, you're trying to decrease the number of mistakes, get as close as possible to 1 out of every million instances having an error. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like this type of content, please remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do have a book reviews playlist. It's called Books. You can see all my previous book reviews that I've done here, and I have 3 more coming your way tonight. So stay tuned, make sure you have your notifications turned on, and I will see you in, I'm not sure, I have to prepare each one, so I have my talking points on each one, so I'll be live again soon-ish. And if you miss it, it's okay, just catch the replay. Mwah! I love you. You are worthy of being loved and feeling comfortable in your own skin. Expreme DMs, squeeze the day. This has been a moment in time with Nex. Remember, I do go live every single day, so make sure you're following me everywhere so you don't miss opportunities to engage with content like this live if that's what you're into. I'll see you guys soon.